האם זה באמת סגולה בדוקה? הסגולה ללמוד בזה?
Erev Tov, everyone. Dober V'yetcher. Good evening. We are in the Zera Shimshon on Parshas Shoftim. We're going to do section number 6. That's Os Vav, our Drush Vav. Before we do, we're going to read a pasuk. Here comes the pasuk. This is from our Parsha of Shoftim, Sefer Devarim, Perek Chaf, pasuk Aleph. Ki seitzei la milchama al oivecha. When you go out to war against your enemy, V'ra'isa sus v'rechev am rav mimcha, and you see a horse and chariot, a nation greater than you, lo sira mehem, do not be afraid of them, do not fear them. Ki Hashem Elokecha imach, because Hashem your God is with you. Hama'alcha me'eretz Mitzrayim, brought you up from the land of Mitzrayim. So, although the Zera Shimshon is not going to discuss it, it's, I think, important and interesting to note that this pasuk is a source for the fact that there is an actual prohibition in the Torah from fearing our enemies when we go out to battle against them. It's not just a matter of some people will be afraid and some people will be less afraid. The Torah is actually saying, lo sira mehem, do not fear them. And a person has, like all mitzvos, a person has to work very hard and very diligently on himself not to feel fear at the approach of a battle against enemies of the Jewish people, exactly as the pasuk says, because Hashem is with us. Hashem is with us in the battle, and therefore there's no cause to be afraid. But that's the pasuk that the Zera Shimshon starts with. We're going to get right into Os Vav, section 6. Ki seitzei la milchama al oivecha. This is the pasuk we just read, of course. When you go out to war against, when you go out to battle against your enemies, v'ra'isa sus v'rechev, and you see a horse and a rider, am rav mimcha, a greater nation, a larger nation than yourself, v'chule, etc. Uperish Rashi. Rashi explains and comments on this pasuk. Sus v'rechev. Rashi notes the singular form of horse in chariot. I'm sorry, horse. It is horse in chariot. I'm sorry. Horse in chariot is correct. Rashi notes the singular. It doesn't say horses in chariots. It says horse and chariot. Be'enai kulam kisus echad. In my eyes, they are all like one horse. Right? So Rashi says, why does the Torah choose to say sus varechev in the singular? Because it's talking, Hashem is saying, when I look at the battle and I look at the enemies of the Jewish people who are about to the Jewish people are about to go into battle against them, all of their horses, there could be hundreds of horses or thousands of horses or tens of thousands of horses, all of the horses look like one horse to me, meaning they're in Hashem's eyes, the numbers are not significant. Hashem, different than most people, doesn't look and start thinking, oh my goodness, look at all these horses. How can the Bnei Yisrael possibly defeat them? Hashem looks down and says, doesn't matter how many horses there are actually there. It looks like one horse. And one horse can obviously be easily defeated. And that's Hashem's perspective. And that should be the perspective of the Jewish people as they go out to battle against this enemy. Rashi continues, V'chein hu omer, and so it says in another place, in another place in Tanakh from Shoftim, Sefer Shoftim, V'hikisa es Midyan keish echad. You will strike Midyan, the nation of Midyan, as one person. So there, the pasuk in Shoftim clearly expresses this idea that from Hashem's perspective, when Bnei Yisrael went out to battle against Midyan in that incident from Sefer Shoftim, Hashem said, you're going to strike them k'ish echad, as if they are one person. They might be thousands, they might be tens of thousands, they might be hundreds of thousands of actual soldiers, but you're going to strike them down as if they were one soldier. V'chein hu omer, and so too it says and this is from Sefer Shmos. It'll sound very familiar from from the Shiras Hayam, from the sea, from the song that the people sang at the Yam Suf after the victory over the Mitzrim. Kivo sus paro, because the horse of Paro came, and of course you see again the singular form of the word sus. It doesn't say susim, horses. It doesn't say susei, horses of. It says sus, singular horse. So it's another example that Rashi brings to show in all three cases, our pasuk and our parsha, and the pasuk in Sefer Shoftim, and the pasuk in Shmos in Beshalach by the Shiras Hayam. In all these cases, Hashem referred to either the enemies themselves, the people, the enemy soldiers, or the horses of the enemies in the singular form to say, don't let the numbers be significant to you, even if the enemy you're going to fight against has many more soldiers, a much larger army, many more horses and chariots and whatever it is that they might have, whatever the numbers are, it's all insignificant. It all comes down and reduces down to one horse or one man, ish echad, or one sus. And therefore, it's not significant, Rashi says, and that's what we learn from this expression in our parsha of sus vorechev. Ad kan Lashono, until here is a quote from the Rashi again on our parsha. V'hasifsei chachomim hikshe. The sifsei chachomim, which is referred to as a super commentary. In other words, it's a commentary on Rashi. So Rashi is, of course, a commentary on the Chumash, on the Torah, and the Sifsei Chachamim is one of the many, many, many commentaries on Rashi's commentary. So the Sifsei Chachamim in the commentary on Rashi referred to, entitled Sifsei Chachamim, Hiksha. There's a question that is posed. Lama Rashi hevi hapasuk kiva sus para. We're going right to the next column, the second column on the same page. Why did Rashi bring the pasuk of kiva sus paro, the horse of Paro came, velo hevi hapasuk shall call sus paro? And he didn't bring the pasuk that appears earlier in the beginning of the Shiras Hayam, in the beginning of the Az Yashir section of the Torah, where it says, call sus paro, all of the horse, again in the singular form, all of the horse of Paro. Very striking pasuk, because you're saying call all, but then you're saying all of the horse as opposed to all of the horses of Paro. And that pasuk appears earlier than the pasuk that Rashi brought, which came from the end of the Shiras Hayam, the end of the Az Yoshir section. So the Sifsei Chachamim asks the question, why did Rashi pass over this pasuk from the beginning of Az Yoshir and bring a pasuk from the end? HaKodum lo, this pasuk is much earlier than the pasuk that Rashi quoted. So if Rashi was looking for a pasuk, why didn't he quote the earlier pasuk instead of skipping it and quoting the later pasuk? When they're both from the same section in the Torah, and presumably they both illustrate the same idea, that when Hashem looked down at the army of Paro, he saw all of the horses as if they were one horse. The Seirates, the Sifsei Chachomim commentary answers, Mishum Disham, because over there in that earlier pasuk from the beginning of Az Yashir, Ksiv Kol Sus, it had the word all of the horse, the mashma kulam, that implies all of them. So the Sifsei Chachamim says the reason Rashi passed up the opportunity to use the pasuk from the earlier pasuk from the beginning of Az Yashir is because of the word call, all. And once it says all, then we do sometimes refer to a whole group of something in the singular. So sus could be used in that situation, that earlier pasuk, without catching our attention as something that is problematic or something that's coming to teach us a special lesson. Whereas later on at the end of Az Yashir, it doesn't use the word call. It just says uva kiva sus paro, the horse of Paro came, and we know it doesn't mean one horse; it means many horses. And so Rashi chose to bring the second later pasuk rather than the earlier pasuk because of the word call, all in the earlier pasuk. Next paragraph. Aval adayin kosher. The Zera Shimshon says, even though the Sifsei Chachamim gave that answer, he thinks it's still a problem. Lama lohevi hapasuk shel sus v'rochvo. Why didn't he bring the pasuk of sus v'rochvo, the horse and its rider? Hakodum lechiva sus paro, which is also earlier than the pasuk that Rashi chose to use of kiva sus paro, the horse of Paro came. So the Zera Shimshon, as we know, pays very, very close analysis and attention to everything that's going on in the psukim, and he notices that the Sifsei Chachamim commentary asked a question that was very basic. Why did Rashi pass up an early pasuk and use the last pasuk instead? And the Sifsei Chachamim gave his answer. Zera Shimshon says, that's very nice. I understand why the first pasuk, why Rashi skipped over the first pasuk in an earlier pasuk in Oz Yashir. However, there's another pasuk that Rashi could have quoted, and that is doesn't have the problem of the word call. It doesn't suffer from that deficiency of call that the Sifsei Chachamim focused on. And it's also earlier than the pasuk that Rashi chose to use. And in this pasuk, again, it uses the singular form, sus v'rochvo, a horse and its rider, when actually it was referring to many, many, many horses with many, many, many horsemen riding them. So the Zera Shimshon feels that the question is still solid and still needs to be answered. Moving to the next page and the top column, the right column. O yesh makshim al Rashi zichronim levracha. There is another question that the commentators ask on Rashi. Shebe parashas Vayishlach, in the Torah portion of Vayishlach, Peresh, Rashi explained, Vayehi li shor v'chamor. This refers to Yaakov's meeting up with his brother Esav when Yaakov was returning with his now very large family from the house of Lavan. And Rashi says, and Yaakov Avinu at that time says, Vayehi li shor v'chamor, and I have an ox in the singular form, and a donkey in the singular form, and goes on to mention other things, all in the singular form, other possessions that he has, all in the singular form, as opposed to the plural form, which seemingly would be more appropriate, because he had lots and lots of each of these different categories. But Yaakov Avinu spoke about the categories in the singular. Here's what Rashi says about that over there in Parshas Vayishlach. Derech Eretz Lomar, it is the normal way, it is the way of the land or the way of people, Lomar, to say, Al Shuvorim Harbe Shor. Many people can refer to many oxen as just shor in the singular form. Kamo, similar to the fact, Kara Hatarnagol, in the pasuk that says the rooster called out, but it was talking about many roosters. Ve'eno omer karu hatarnagolim, and it didn't say the roosters plural called out. Ad kan lashono, until here is a quote from Rashi. So he, very interestingly, we see that in a different location, when the Torah used the singular form of shor and chamor, an ox and a donkey, even though it was referring to, Yaakov was referring to many, many animals, Rashi explains by saying this is a form of speech. This is customary in speech sometimes for people to refer to lots of animals with the name of the single type of animal. You don't have to say, Yaakov Avinu didn't have to say, I have oxen, lots of oxen. He just said, I have an ox. He didn't have to say, I have lots and lots of donkeys, thousands of donkeys. He said, chamor, I have a donkey. And Rashi says, that's acceptable. That's what people do. It's the way that people talk. So the question, which is coming up right now, is very obvious. V'chan, and here, minole dachashuvim kesus echad. How did Rashi know that when the Torah used the expression sus echad, one, it just used the singular form, kisus, like a horse, that was to teach us, as Rashi said in our parsha, that was to teach us that in Hashem's eyes, all of the horses of our enemies look kisus echad, like one horse. How did Rashi know that lesson? Dilma, perhaps, l'chach ne'amar sus varechev. The real reason it said, perhaps, the reason it said a horse and a chariot, oki vasus paro, or Paro's horse came, loshen yochi, the reason it said it in the singular, the derech b'nei adam lomar kain. This is the way of people to sometimes speak this way, al susim harbe, on many horses. They can refer to many horses as sus in the singular form. Kemo kara hatarnagol, as we have, again, in the example of the rooster called out, when it was really referring to many roosters calling out, but it used the singular form. So we're left now at this point with two questions on the Rashi, with the original question being, why did Rashi choose a pasuk to give an example of the singular form at the end of the Shiras Hayam, at the end of the Oz Yoshir section in the Torah, when he could have chosen from an earlier pasuk, the first pasuk, as the Sifsei Chachamim points out, or he could have chose from a middle area pasuk, which would still have been earlier than the pasuk that Rashi chose to quote. So Rashi passed over two psukim in which he could have made his point about Hashem seeing all the horses of our enemies as one horse, passed up those two psukim and quoted from the end of the Shiras Hayam. Why did he do that? That's question one. And question two, Rashi on Vayishlach, when Yaakov Avinu uses the singular form, seems to give a totally different explanation, which makes the whole question moot, makes the whole question disappear, which is, Rashi says, in grammatically speaking, sometimes it's acceptable, and sometimes people refer to many animals with just in the singular form, many oxen as shor, many donkeys as chamor, and so on. So here, Rashi seemingly could have chose to say the exact same thing, that when the Torah, in three different cases, and perhaps more, uses the word sus, horse, in the singular form, it's a way of referring to many horses in the singular form, which is grammatically appropriate and sometimes done. And this is the way that people talk. And so Rashi could have used that same explanation, but he did not. He chose not to. Those are the two questions that the Zera Shimshon is focused on. Next paragraph. Vahado misoretzes beyerech haverta. And this question may be answered along with its friend, meaning the other question. If you answer one of these questions, you're going to be able to answer the other one as well. So the Zera Shimshon is going to show us how we can answer both of the questions kind of at the same time, simultaneously. She'im hoya mevi Rashi hapasuk sus virochvo. If Rashi had in fact brought the pasuk, which is not the earliest one, but it is an earlier form where the word sus, horse, is used to refer to many horses. Lo hoyaboraya klal, there would not have been a proof at all, shel lefonov, that in front of Hashem, chashuvim kulam kisus echad, that all of Paro's horses were considered like one horse. That would not have been a proof at all. Shahayisi Yocholomar, because I would have been able to say, Shahapasuk diber kederach b'nei adam. The pasuk is using the regular speech of people. We know that the Chazal teach us dibra Torah b'loshen b'nei adam, that the Torah sometimes talks, uses certain expressions, capturing and basing itself on the way that people talk. So too here, we would not have had the right to learn anything extra or special from the use of the word sus in the singular when it was referring to many, many horses, because perhaps, as Rashi himself explained on Parshas Vayishlach, diber kederach b'nei adam, the pasuk is talking in the language of people. She'omrim al susim harbe sus, and people sometimes say about many horses, horse. They use the singular form. Perhaps similar to when we say fish to refer to many fish. And similar, you can say source, sus, or shore, or hamor, to refer to many of those types of animals. You don't have to use only the plural form. Umishum hachi hevi haraya dafka, and because of this, Rashi brought the proof specifically, me, from the pasuk at the end of Oz Yashir, kiva sus paro, when the horse of Paro came. The al pasuk ze kosher, because on this pasuk there was a different problem, another problem. Lama parat dafka sus paro. Why did this pasuk specifically say the horse of Paro? Velo amar stam, and it didn't say plainly, kiva sus v'rochvo ufarashav bayam, because his horses and chariots, his horse and chariot and his horsemen came into the sea. Why did it specifically mention Paro in terms of the horse, as if it was the horse of Paro? Kemosha Amar b'techilas Ashira, as the pasuk said at the beginning of the Oz Yashir section, Sus v'rochvo Rama vayam, the horse and its rider were thrown into the sea. So Zera Shimshon says that the pasuk from the end of Oz Yashir was chosen because we have to kind of put two pieces of information here to really understand what the Zera Shimshon say, because the first pasuk where sus is used, that's the one the Sifsei Chachamim talked about. It has the word call, and the Sifsei Chachamim already told us that knocks out that pasuk as a source for Rashi's teaching about Hashem seeing many horses of the enemy as only one horse. The middle pasuk in the Shiras Hayam in the Oz Yashir section also it gets knocked out, because when it comes along, we could give it the explanation of a correct grammatical usage, and then the use that people have, the general use that people have, and saying, referring to many horses as sus. But by the time we get to the third pasuk, there, since the Torah, so to speak, goes out of its way to refer to the horse in the singular form, there our ears can perk up and we can say, wait a minute, there's something being taught to us here that's above and beyond the regular, the normal course of events in the psukim. And the Zera Shimshon says, and our ears already have to perk up with that pasuk because it put in the word paro when it seemingly didn't have to do it. The word paro seems to be extraneous in that pasuk, but so there must be a reason that it's there, and that can help us understand why the word sus catches Rashi's attention specifically in that pasuk, and Rashi uses it to learn out his lesson. Next paragraph. Elavadai tzorech lomar, but for sure we need to say, Dechidusha kamash malon kra. We definitely need to say that this pasuk at the end of the Shiras Hayam is coming to teach us a chiddush, a new idea. The Isa b'medrash Shir Hashirim, because it states in the Medrash on Sefer Shir Hashirim, L'susasi b'richvei paro. There's a pasuk in Shir Hashirim, and you can see the location in Perek Aleph, where it says, L'susasi, to my horse in the chariots of Paro. And this is as if Hashem is speaking and saying, my horse is mixing it up, so to speak, with the chariots of Paro. It's as if Hashem has a horse that fought against Paro's horses and chariots at the Yamsuf. So here's the comment from the Medrash on that pasuk, on that unusual pasuk. Rochav Paro al sus zochar. Paro rode into battle on a male horse, a stallion. And Hashem, as it were, appeared as if he were riding on a stallion as well. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, and this is a reference back to our pasuk that we quoted a few lines ago, Lissusasi, to my horse, berichve paro, which was, so to speak, matching the chariot and the horse that Paro had. So Hashem was matching Paro's horse. If Paro started riding into battle on a male horse, a stallion, then Hashem appeared as if he was doing the same thing. Of course, Hashem has no body, and Hashem doesn't actually ride a horse, obviously. But this is the appearance that Hashem wanted Paro to see. Omar Paro, so when Paro saw that, he said, Hasus Zohar, a male horse, Horeg be'olav la milchama. It kills its owner, meaning its rider, in battle. There are different explanations to this, but the simplest, most basic one is that Paro said, if you ride a male horse into battle, even in the midst of the battle, in the heat of the battle, it will sometimes stop and start pursuing a female horse. And that can get the rider killed, because the rider, of course, is trying to attack the enemy or trying to escape from the enemy. But the rider is depending upon the horse to follow its instructions exactly in the battle. And if a horse suddenly decides to ignore what the rider is telling it and what the rider is trying to get it to do, and it goes and chases after a female horse that happens to pass by, then the rider can get itself killed. Ella hareni rochev al susa nekeva. But I now will ride on a female horse. So Paro decided, I was riding a male horse into battle. I see that Hashem chose to copy me and mimic me and also ride a male horse in this battle. So I'm going to switch to a female horse because I guess Paro was thinking, I know something Hashem doesn't know. Hashem doesn't realize that he could have a problem with riding on a male horse, and I do realize it, so I'm switching to a mare, to a female horse. Hadohu dichsiv v'chule. And that's what it meant in the pasuk, that Hashem's was copying what Paro was doing, as we'll see. As the Medrash over there in the part that the Zera Shimshon left out says that, and then Hashem appeared to Paro as if he was riding a female horse as well. So Hashem kept copying Paro's choices. Chozar v'rochav Paro al sus Adam al sus Lavan al sus Shachor. Paro was intent on changing horses so that Hashem couldn't keep up with him. So he jumped off his female horse and he got on a red horse, and then he got off that horse and rode a white horse. Then he got off that horse and he rode a black horse. Paro kept switching. Kiviyochol nigla kadosh baruch hu al sus Adam Lavan v'shachar. So Hashem also, as it were, appeared as if he was switching to a red horse, a white horse, and a black horse. Hadohu dichsiv, and that's what another pasuk says from Habakkuk, Darachta vayam susecha, musvon pagin. And that's the comment. So the pasuk says, Darachta vayam susecha, you made your horses go in the sea. Susvan pagin means many different types of horses. Hashem rode on many different types of horses, or appeared to ride on many different types of horses to copy and emulate what Paro was doing, and to make it clear to Paro that he could do whatever he wanted. He could switch as many times as he wanted. He could ride any type of horse that he wanted, and nonetheless Hashem would be with him step for step until his doom was complete. Ad Kahn Lashono, until here, is a quote from the Medrash in Shir Hashirim. The next paragraph. V'hoil shebekan parat hakosuv sus paro. And here, since the pasuk specifically said the single form with the word paro, the horse of Paro, lefi shenishtana lekama susim. Meanwhile, Paro had changed to many different horses. We know from the Medrash and Shir Hashirim and what it taught us that the pasuk really should have said, to be accurate, the pasuk should have emphasized that Paro rode many horses in the battle of the Yam Suf, because he kept switching horses in his futile attempt to stay one step in front of Hashem. But since the Torah insists in this pasuk talking about Paro himself and his horses, since it insists upon not saying it in the plural form, It doesn't say suse paro, it says sus paro. It must be to teach us shelifnei HaKodesh Baruch Hu, that in front of Hashem, hayu chashuvim kulam kesus echad, all of these horses of paro were like one horse. So the Zera Shimshon has now, by introducing this teaching in the Shir HaShirim, the Medrash Shir HaShirim, the Zera Shimshon has now shown us the real reason why Rashi passed over his first chance with a pasuk and his second chance with a pasuk in the Shir Hayam, and only chose the last pasuk at the end because it had the word paro in it, to learn out this lesson about the fact that in Hashem's eyes, all the horses look like one. Why did he choose that pasuk? Because of all the different psukim, that's the only one where really it would seem that the Torah needed, so to speak, to use the plural form because of the many horses that Paro kept changing from one to another. And in order to capture, or I should say, in order to express that part of the story, again, that was revealed to us in the Medrash Shir HaShirim, the pasuk would have needed to say it in the plural form. Why did the pasuk still insist upon singular form? It must be because of this chidush, this new idea that Rashi brings us and introduces us to, about the fact that Hashem was saying all of the horses and all of the enemy soldiers and all of the things that the enemy brings against you, no matter how many there are, they all look like one in my eyes, Hashem says, and they should also look like one to you. Don't be fearful, don't be overwhelmed, don't be concerned about how many there are. None of that's important to me, Hashem says and teaches us, and it shouldn't be important to you as well. Next paragraph. The ode, the me'ikara kushya lesa. Another way of answering our question is that from the very beginning, me'ikara, from the beginning, from the inception, kusha lesa, there isn't really a question. Why? De bishlama b'Yaakov, this is now referring to the question about Yaakov also referring to his animals in the singular, and Rashi saying that that's a normal way to speak. In the case of Yaakov Avinu, lo hoya min haroi sheyishtabach atzmo lifnei Esav. It would not have been appropriate for Yaakov in that situation to praise himself overly much in front of Esav. Lomar, to say, sheyesh lo shivarim v'chamorim, to come right out and say, I have lots of oxen and I have lots of donkeys. That would not have been an appropriate, respectful thing to show, because Yaakov wanted to show deference to Esav. The mashma rabim, had he used plural words, that would have implied that he had a lot of oxen and donkeys. And as we said, it mentioned other things as well, a lot of sheep and a lot of servants and a lot of maidservants. V'dai hoyolo lomar, and it would have been sufficient for him to say, sheyesh lo kol elu haminim, that he has all of these different types. I have many types of things. I have oxen, and I have donkeys, and I have sheep, and I have servants, and I have maidservants, which is what Yaakov did. To Moshe Peresh Bazohar, which is explained in the Zohar in a very different way. Shekavonoso hoyusolomar, Yaakov Avinu's intention when he talked about these different types of things that he owned, properties that he possessed, his intention was shehu yochol lehachniach kol min klipa sheba'olam, that he is able to subdue every type of impure force in the world, sheremuzim, that are hinted to be'elu hachameshes minim, through these 5 types of things, of possessions that Yaakov mentioned, va'ayin sham, and look there in the Zohar for more details. So the Zera Shimshon says the whole question from the beginning that Rashi dealt with was why Yaakov Avinu used the singular form, but that's, Zera Shimshon says, that's not really a question for 2 reasons. One, it wouldn't have been appropriate for Yaakov to use the plural, because then it's as if he would be antagonizing Esav to his face, saying, look how many oxen I have, look how many donkeys I have, look how wealthy and rich and powerful I've become. But Yaakov's Avinu's intention was the opposite. His intention was to show deference to Esav, his brother, and to minimize, to kind of take a modest, humble approach, and therefore it made sense for him to use the singular form, in addition to the explanation of the Zohar that Yaakov had a hidden, so to speak, message for Esav, which was, I have each of these things, types of things, and each one represents the fact that I have power over a certain kind of impure force in the world. So when he said, I have an ox, he was messaging Esav and saying, you know that having an ox represents the fact that I have power over the impure forces which are represented by an ox. And when I say I have a chamor, I have power over, it means I have power over and can subdue the impure forces in the world that are represented by a chamor, and so forth and so on. So that's an additional reason why Yaakov Avinu used the singular form. So that whole problem disappears, as Zera Shimshon says. Ivra, indeed, she'im lo hayu loshon hedyot misayo, sha'olam lo yu korim lashvarim harbe shor. If Yaakov Avinu did not have, meaning according to the way we originally understood that pasuk in Vayishlach about Yaakov Avinu and how he described his animals, if he didn't have Lashon Hedyot, the regular language of people, Misayo, to assist him, Shaha'olam lo yukorim lashvarim harbe shor, meaning if it wasn't in fact true that many people refer to their many oxen in the singular form as shor, if that wasn't true, lo haya yochel lomar lashon shor v'chamor, then Yaakov Avinu would not have been able to refer to his many oxen and donkeys in the singular form, neged ha'emes, because that would have been opposed to the truth. We know that Yaakov Avinu is referred to as the one of the avos who was the ish emes, the man of truth, and Hashem gave him a special gift of emes, of truth. So Yaakov Avinu could not have referred to his oxen in the singular form and other animals in the singular form when he had so many of them, unless that was a conventional way of speaking. Shahare hoyu lo harbe mikol min v'min, because he had many of each one of these types of things. Avol hoil shederach ha'olam kach, but as Rashi pointed out, since this is the way of the world to speak that way, tofas derech ha'olam, Yaakov Avinu chose this way of the world, derech hapshat, as a simple way of speaking. V'o derech remez hodia le'esav, and also he gave a hint, a deep, hidden mysterious hint to Esav. She'eno misyore min haklipos umeruchos hatuma, that Yaakov Avinu was not afraid of the impure forces that Esav could command, and from the different evil ruchos, evil spirits that were at Esav's command. Yaakov was saying, number one, I'm speaking in a simple way to describe the things that I own in the singular form, because that's the way people can speak, and I'm choosing to speak modestly about my possessions. And also, as we said from the lesson and the teaching in the Zohar, Yaakov Avinu chose to hint to Esav that he could control all of these klipos, all of these impure forces that could be hinted to when he mentioned each of the types of things that he owned. Next paragraph. Aval Kahn dichsiv ashira l'Hashem, but here in the Shiras Hayam that starts off, I will sing a song of praise to Hashem, ki go'o, because Hashem is exceedingly exalted. Sus v'rochvo rama vayam, a horse and its rider were thrown up or uplifted, thrown up into the sea. Hasvorahi lehefech. The logic would tell us the opposite, as it does in the case of Yaakov Avinu describing his animals and his possessions to Esav. Here it's the opposite. Shehayu lo lomar susim v'rochvehem rama vayam. It should have said the plural form, horses and their riders were thrown into the sea. Kedei lahagadil hageus shelo, in order to magnify the glory of Hashem. The pasuk, the whole point of these songs in Shiras Hayam and the song of the sea is for Moshe Rabbeinu to glorify as much as possible with his song and singing with the people the greatness and glory of Hashem. V'hachanami b'pasuk ki vasus paro. And so too, at the pasuk that Rashi made his comment on, because the horse of Paro came, v'chule, etc., shehusium hashira, it's the end of the song, v'tokef hanes, and the it's describing the power of the miracle, sheka'asher bo'u suse Paro bayam. The horses of Paro came into the sea. Heishiv alehem esmei hayam, and Hashem turned on them the waters of the Yamsuf. Af al gav shehoyu Yisrael b'soch hayam bayabosha. Even though Bnei Yisrael was still passing through the Yamsuf on dry land, meaning the Zera Shimshon is saying, don't forget how things worked back there in Sefer Shmos at the Kriyas Yamsuf. It wasn't just one miracle. Miracles and miracles upon miracles were happening in every moment of the Kriyas Yamsuf, of the splitting of the sea. And one of them was Hashem did not make it so that the Bnei Yisrael would be up and on out of the sea and on dry land, completely out of the sea when he brought the waters down on the Egyptians. No, even while Bnei Yisrael was still in the middle of the sea, Hashem brought another section of the sea crashing down on the Mitzrim, on the Egyptians, to wipe them out, even though Bnei Yisrael was still in the sea and they remained on dry land, unimpeded and unaffected by the sea crashing down on the Mitzrim. Kemoshe Siem, as the pasuk concludes, Uvenei Yisrael holchu vayabosha, and Bnei Yisrael walked on dry land even while the Egyptians were being drowned. Elavadai tzarech lomar, but definitely we need to say she'amar sus lashon yochid. If the Torah chose to pass up all of the compelling reasons to use the plural form in this last pasuk of Shir Sayam, it must be that it wanted to teach a very important lesson, a fundamental lesson, by using the singular form instead of the plural form. To teach that in front of Hashem, in Hashem's eyes, all of the horses and all of the enemy soldiers and forces, all are like one. They're insignificant. The numbers don't matter at all to Hashem. And so too, they shouldn't matter to us and to Klal Yisrael. And any situation when Chas v'Sholom we're battling against our enemies, the numbers shouldn't matter, because we have to have the proper emunah and bitachon in Hashem and view our enemy the way Hashem's does, as being insignificant, as their numbers being insignificant. Yasher Koch to joining us in the learning this week in the Zera Shimshon, and we look forward, God willing, to learning in the Zera Shimshon again together on next week's Parsha.